Okay, so I want to take a look at the Classify It section over here on the right side of the second page. I'm going to zoom in on that section. Okay, so I want to classify, and I have a text box in there, and it says to write all classifications for each polygon. So what that means is we are going to look at what's marked, and we're going to decide if it's a quadrilateral, if it's a parallelogram, if it's a rectangle, if it's a rhombus, if it's a square. It could be one of those, it could be two or three of those, it could be all of them. Okay, but we're going to identify it. So if I look at my four-sided figure here, I'm noticing that nothing's parallel. Okay, so these two sides aren't parallel, these two sides aren't parallel. And since most of the figures we've been working with have had at least two pair of parallel sides, this is not a parallelogram. That means it also knocks off rectangle, square, and rhombus because those are parallelograms. So this is just simply a quadrilateral. It's a four-sided figure. You want to adjust the box. Now the next one, I see I have four equal sides. Okay, so those single tick marks that indicate four equal sides, and I have the right angle symbol in the corner. Okay, well to me that tells me it's a square. So a square for sure. But it also says to say all of the classifications. Well, we know that the square is made from a combination of the rhombus and the rectangle. So it's a square, a rhombus, a rectangle. We know all three of those are parallelograms. So it's also a parallelogram. And it's four sides. So it has all of them. Quadrilateral, parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and it's a square. I still misspelled parallelogram. One too many L's. All right, there we go. So it's a quadrilateral because it's got four sides. It's a parallelogram because we decided it was a square. Still misspelled it. There we go. Now it's fixed. We decided it was a square because of the markings and because of the right angle in the corner. And because it's a square, that means it's a rectangle and a rhombus because that's how we get a square. We combine those two. And all three of them are parallelograms, and it's a quadrilateral. Okay, the next one, I'm noticing the parallel line marks. So I do have two pair of parallel sides. But I'm also noticing that these tick marks tell me that all four sides are congruent. So that tells me it's a rhombus. And if it's a rhombus, it's a parallelogram. And a parallelogram is a quadrilateral. So we have quadrilateral, reduce my font size. It's a parallelogram. And it's a rhombus. So all three of those apply. Those are all of the ways I could name this figure. Okay, next, let's see, let's go down to this. A diagonal of a rectangle divides it into, I don't have a text box, I'll have to add one. And I can rotate it to Trying to match my bubble. Okay, so what happens when we draw one diagonal in a rectangle? It gives us two congruent triangles. It splits it into two congruent triangles. That's what happens. I get two congruent triangles. That means the two triangles are equal to each other. Two congruent triangles. So if I go up and I mark my diagonal, okay, not sure why that's not drawing. Maybe I can draw an arrow or not. Okay, so if I draw the diagonal, and I just need one, well, these two sides were opposite, that means they're congruent. These two sides are opposite, and they're congruent. And then the diagonal would become a reflexive side, so they would be congruent by side, side, side. They would also be congruent by side, angle, side, because we would have the side, the 90-degree angle, and then the side. And then we would still have the diagonal piece there. Okay, I do want to go down to classify it. Now these directions are a little bit different because it says they want the most specific classification. So there's only one correct answer here, and we want the most specific one. The most specific name. Okay, so when I'm looking at it, I want to look at the markings. And I may zoom in a little bit more on that one. I'm going to look at the markings. So I see I have parallel sides left and right, parallel sides up and down. I also have the angles marked. The opposite angles are congruent. And I also have the other pair of opposite angles are congruent. Okay, well, we know it's a quadrilateral, but it's more specific than that because we do have the parallel lines. So that tells me it's at least a parallelogram. So if I'm looking for more specific than a parallelogram, that would be the rectangle, rhombus, and square. So for it to be the rectangle, I would have to have 90-degree angles. Well, that's not marked, so it's not a rectangle. For the rhombus, I would have 4 sides congruent. I don't have the sides marked congruent, so I can't tell if they're all the same or not. And then, of course, that eliminates the square because I don't have either one of the conditions of the rectangle or the rhombus. So the most specific name for this one is a parallelogram. That's the most specific. Okay, so at this point in time, you should have your rectangles, rhombus, and squares done. We should have all the classify it done on the top right, and we should have one done on the top left. We'll get to our trapezoids and kites another day.